The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our next webinar in our series of tips and tricks from your good folks at Clear Insight. Glad to have everyone who has joined us today for our webinar. We got quite a number of people from across North America that have joined us. All of you, no doubt, in one fashion or another, are involved in the usage or the administration of the Cognos TM1 product. And so we appreciate having you along and on board with us. This is intended to be, if some of you may have been on other tips and tricks webinars that we've run, and in the same fashion we intend to make this as interactive as possible in a public webinar scenario. You will see, and you'll be reminded a little later as well, to make sure as we go through the webinar, we want to take your questions and answer any issues that you may be having and try and help you out. That's the intent of this webinar today. So thanks for joining, and we'll get started. We're just past the top of the hour, and we want to redeem your time, and so we will be closed up within the hour. So today online from Clear Insight, just some of the folks actually that are on from Clear Insight, myself of course, Ian Margerison. We also have Bob Gill, who's the lead architect here with us at Clear Insight, and we'll introduce Bob a little later, but Bob will be taking the lion's share of the webinar today. Also assisting on the webinar, Kit Chan, who's our services leader, and Susan Malik is on board as well, president of Clear Insight. So the agenda today, we are going to just do a few introductions and objectives as we move through. We have a number of surveys that we find very useful in our webinars out to the audience, useful for us to help direct, especially in webinars like this, to direct the tips and tricks in the direction that you folks are looking for. But it's also very interesting for each of you as listeners and viewers on the webinar to see who else is on, not necessarily individually who's on, but to see where you stand relative to the questions with other organizations. And it's very helpful to work in a peer sense with your peers. Part of the tips and tricks will involve some live demonstrations, and then we will handle the Q&A and wrap up, and we'll seek to leave lots of time for Q&A. So again, be sure to go into the chat line there and send your questions in. Susan will be taking care of those when we get to that at the end of the session. So for many of you some on the line who are our clients, others who have been in many of our other webinars, this may be a little bit of a recap. For those that are not quite as aware of who we are, Clear Insight, we are an advanced IBM business partner. We're a group of individuals that are really a senior group of individuals that have come together to meet the needs in the marketplace, specifically more around financial performance, the Office of Finance and Business Analytics. Our specialties in our work with our clients include budgeting, planning, forecasting, financial reporting and disclosure, business intelligence, and help companies drive growth and manage risk with these various solutions, of course, focused around the Cognos suite of products, and are able to resell and support you in your renewals and licenses as well. Across North America and actually into South America as well, we have clients in a number of verticals, some that are mentioned here: engineering, entertainment, marketing, telecom, energy. And so some of you may find yourselves in there, and that's a little bit about who we are and where we're coming from in this webinar. So some of the objectives in the webinar, first of all, of course, as a tips and tricks webinar, is to try and help you with your day-to-day operations of your Cognos solutions. In this case with TM1, many of you are experts probably on the call. Some of you are new to TM1, that's okay. Wherever you stand, we're hoping that we bring some unique tips and tricks that we have developed over many years of working with these solutions that may help you overcome little issues that you've had in your solutions or challenges. And that's really the core objective here. In addition, it's to perhaps tweak your ideas and thoughts on ways you can leverage your TM1 solution further in your organization Perhaps some of you are only using it for budgeting or planning and are not using it for consolidations, for example, or are not using it for performance reporting or for business intelligence. And this product supports all those solutions, and there may be ways for you to leverage that beyond, and we might be able to show you some of that today. Of course, to introduce Clear Insight, for those of you who are not aware of us as a company and who our experts are, and of course, our objective overall with all our clients is to help you gain back time, control, and confidence in all you do in the Office of Finance and Business Intelligence. So our first audience poll, just to make sure you're all there, is you're coming, each of you, to this because you have some familiarity or usage of TM1. As you well know, TM1 is a front-end interface for the Office of Finance for Budgeting, Planning, and Forecasting. But within the context of Express and Enterprise and Disclosure Management, TM1 is an underlying database OLAP engine to support that tool. So you're coming from all different directions perhaps, so we just want to see what our audience is like. So Susan, if you could open up the poll, and then we will have each of you answer the poll question, and we'll leave it open for 30 seconds or so. And we would ask each of you to put down, now you can select all that can apply here as well actually, so you may be using multiple elements of those. All right, we're just about everybody in there has voted. We'll give you another 9 or 10 seconds, and we'll close that poll up. All right, Susan, if you want to close up the poll, and all of you should see the results there. Very interesting. Over 90% of you are, in fact, using Cognos TM1 as the interface for your budgeting, planning, forecasting, etc. 13% on Cognos Express, and 22 of you, which is probably some of you in the as a dual answer to number 1, using disclosure management. So that is fantastic. Thank you for that. 9% in other. Let's move on to the next poll question. What business needs are being met with your TM1 Cognos solution? So again, a select all that can apply. Susan, if you can open up the poll, and are you using it for just budgeting? Are you using it for forecasting, etc.? Almost 90% of you have voted so far. If you haven't put a vote in, you got a couple seconds there, and just put in your additional votes. All right, that's terrific. Susan, if you want to close up the poll, thank you very much. And again, for each of you viewing, you'll see it's a great cross-section there, distribution across all the elements. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that over 50% or 50% of you are using your TM1 solution for BI and dashboards in addition to your planning solutions, and almost 50% of you for consolidation. So that is great to see. A number of those areas are areas where I think we can help you with some tips and tricks. All right, I think we have one more poll before we get into the meat of it. And this kind of narrows it down to the tips and tricks. Which pain points have really been a challenge to you in the past year? And these are kind of high-level questions, and you may be stuck to other here, but if it's one or the other, please put your answer down on that. Susan, if you want to open it up. So you're dealing with server crashes, with slow performance of your solution, your flexibility really is what 3 is about, and 4 is more with back-end processes. And again, on this one, you can select all that apply. Hopefully we don't have any one online challenge that you have to select one in every one, but no doubt each one of you will be able to pick one area there that afflicts you. All right, almost up to 90% again. Just give another second or two. Okay, Susan, if you want to close that up. So here we've got a bit of a distribution across, but almost 60% of you answered other. So that tells me that we hopefully will see lots coming in on the chat line of your specific questions, and we will be sure to deal with that together. Okay. Thank you very much for your responses there. We will now shortly, I'll turn it over to Bob Gill, who is our lead architect. Bob is a lead project manager and business consultant with us here at Clear Insight, experienced in all aspects of solution implementation across many verticals, including telecom, healthcare, education, finance, technology, and government. He leads many of our solution implementations for and works with finance, sales, marketing, HR, operations, and he's keen understanding and known for his ability to transform business challenges into system designs that exceed user expectations. So we're glad to have Bob taking us through the tips and tricks. So I will turn it over now to Bob as our lead presenter and take you through. I'll come back a little later and we'll kind of just do a quick summary and then move into Q&A. So Bob, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Ian. That's a great introduction. So I'll just move over to my screen here. So thanks for everyone for attending today. What I want to walk through with you today is some TM1 tip areas. I thought I'll give you an overview of the areas we'll cover, and then we'll try and get through as much as we can in the time we have. So first off, we'll start off with a few things in Excel. So some people, the TM1 Excel tool is really called Accelerator, but some people may know it as Perspectives. Then we're going to talk about editing Turbo Integrator processes. We'll look at it within Architect and also within Performance Modeler. Then we'll talk a little bit about server monitoring. So in 10.2, there's a new tool available called Operations Management Console. So we'll take a look at that. I'll show you what that's all about. And then last but not least, I'll show you the change management and documentation pieces in CubeDocs. So CubeDocs has been around for a while in documentation, but just recently they added change management to their piece for TM1, which is pretty handy. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So please, just as Ian said, please ask your questions in the chat and fill out the survey at the end to let us know what you'd like to see next time. So let's talk about TM1 and Excel. So what we'll go through is some challenges. I often get questions around, well, how do you do alternating formatting, alternating row formatting in active forms? So I'll show you a quick tip on that. We'll also talk about defaults for subnums. It's a simple thing to add in and it tends to improve performance and avoid a couple of pitfalls. Also, it's kind of counterintuitive, but deleting out extra rows from your active forms will actually improve performance, and I'll show you why that is. Also, we'll talk about some pros and cons of using AutoCal and placeholders. So let's take a look at some of those right now. So imagine here we are in Excel. We've got our TM1 Accelerator client open, and we're going to explore into our TM1 data set. We're going to pick out, now I'm going to navigate to a cube, maybe pick up a view of this, and here we are. Okay, this looks great. We want to do some work with this view here. So we pull this into an active form in Excel. So far so good, everything looks fine. Now, for getting data and working with it, this is probably all we need, but you notice the formatting here is not alternating. Now, if we do a couple of quick changes here, we're going to show our format area. All that's going to do is show our column A and also show our rows 1 through, in this case 8 will show up. So this is the formatting behind that active form. It's not limited to what you see here though. So you can add rows to this section as well as change the formulas you see in this column A. This is what you'll see by default. And I won't go into the definition of what each of these functions are. You can look that up afterwards if you choose to. But needless to say, it just figures out what kind of element, what kind of row am I looking at, is this a summary row or not, and what formatting should I apply. So you get that just from pulling down that, an active form out of TM1. But oftentimes a table like that is not very clear to read. So what may be a little bit more easy to read is something like this, where you have alternating formatting. I just used pale yellow as an example, but what you can see is I've added 2 more rows here to the top section, simply called odd and even. You can put whatever characters you want there, and then adjust the formula accordingly. So now I'll go into this one in a little bit more detail. So here we're just using the simple Excel row function to say, well, what row are we in? Okay, so we get the row number. We're going to take the mod of that, which is really getting the remainder. So we're in row 20, mod 2 gives us a remainder of 0. So it's not equal to 1, so we're in the even section. So it's going to pull up whatever I said is even. So here we see there's our even formatting. It says even, and then it shows the formatting for even. So just by doing that kind of formatting here, you can have as many formatting rows as you want in this format range. And as long as you've got something to evaluate to which formatting you want, you can really extend this to whatever you need to do. So not just for alternating formatting. You could do it for different levels, really be as complex or as exact as you want to be. So while we're here, something else I want to talk about is deleting out these extra rows. So you'll notice that if I go and rebuild this book, I see all the same data. This is what I want to see. Now if I select everything and delete it, your first impulse may be, oh my god, why did you do that? But if I just rebuild it, they come back. So just by the nature of how TM1 evaluates a web sheet, and oftentimes a report book, a Excel workbook as well, if you have these extra rows, and I say extra because on the first row you'll see the actual TM1 report row function, but beyond that you won't see that. Only the row where you see a TM1 report row function is that's the only row that really needs to exist for these to be generated. Now if I run this, or I open this file in Excel, or I open this over the web, it's going to evaluate all of these DBRW functions in every cell, and then it's going to rebuild it, which does it again. So a simple trick is just delete out all of this stuff, and you actually publish this file. And you know that, okay, well by itself this is not usable, but you know that when it first gets loaded, it's going to automatically rebuild anyways. So just by taking out these additional rows, oftentimes you'll get a 50% improvement in performance, particularly web sheets. So along with the same view we're looking at here, we're using some subnums to allow us to pick a few things off of our list. Now subnums have different parameters in here, and I won't go into the details of each of them, but for one thing that they do have is a default. So in this case it's Massachusetts. So if I take that out, I just don't see anything in my selection. I can still double click on it, and I still get my selection, and it knows what subset, and I can pick Massachusetts again, and it's fine. But a little trick you may not know is that if you don't have a default in these subnums, you'll actually take a performance hit. The exact details around why, I'm not entirely confident I can explain that. I don't want to give you misinformation. I suspect it's related to a full pass and undimension if there's no default here. So simple thing to do is if you can have a default in your subnums, put that default in. And it could just be a number. It doesn't necessarily mean that it need to be an exact name. It could be just put the number 1, so that takes the first element in your subset or dimension. And that'll help tune the performance in your web sheets or here in Excel. One other thing you'll notice, see here I've got this cell selected. You don't see anything on the sheet, but you'll see a placeholder word here. So all it's doing here is it's a white on white trick. So by putting the word placeholder in there, white font on a white background, you don't see it. Now you may ask, well, why am I doing that? Over the web, you'll see, I'll use this cell here as an example. You see that little drop down that appears. So this down icon that you see here, this drop down icon, it has a challenge rendering on the web. If you don't put these kind of invisible placeholders in a given row, whenever you have multiple sets like this, you may end up with the drop downs showing up at different spots. You may have one drop down showing up way over here, another drop down showing up over here, and doesn't look right when they don't line up. So by just putting in this invisible placeholder here, you're going to be able to manage where those things come from. It does depend on the length of the value in the drop down. It can change depending on the value of the selection. So I guess that leads me to the next one, is about AutoCalc. Now, depending on the type of item you're looking at, or a report or template, you have to decide whether you want to have AutoCalc on or off. If you're looking at a report, I suggest turning AutoCalc off, because that'll make navigation easier. If someone's in Excel or even over the web, if they're just using the keys to cursor left and right, up and down, or even using the Enter key to go down cells, it can be much faster with AutoCalc off, because every time they do that action by changing a cell, there's no need to recalculate everything. Now that being said, if you're looking at a template where the data will be changing, particularly with dependent formulas, just like in Excel, you want to make sure you consider whether you should have AutoCalc on or off. You may want things to recalculate very quickly. Maybe beyond just recalc, you want it to rebuild. So those are things to consider. Particular AutoCalc, really if it's read-only, AutoCalc off. If it's a template, I'd say leave AutoCalc on to make sure it's a good experience for users. So that's some items we've talked in perspectives here, or accelerator. Let's pop back to our agenda slide here. So we talked about alternating formatting, defaults for subnums, active forms, AutoCalc, and the placeholders. So let's switch gears a bit. Now we're going to talk about editing TIs. So it's probably not a very glamorous topic to talk about, but coding conventions can be a very helpful thing here. Depending on which organization you're in, you may already have these kind of conventions in existence. If you've got a bunch of developers that have come and gone over time, you may have a mishmash of different stuff all over the place. We took some time to review what seems to be prominent around different TM1 implementations, and we found dot notation to be quite popular. And some of the advantages of dot notation is because TM1 is not an object-oriented language, there's no TM1 dot notation is fine. In other languages, a dot notation may reference a method or a property of an object, where we don't have that concern here. So by using dot notation, it's actually shorter than you'd find with camel case or underscores. So names tend to take up less screen real estate when you're reading through lists of them. And they're easier to read with mixed options. So in this case, you may give the illusion of an object-oriented piece, but you may have your web sheet dot 3 or 4 different actions on that, or vice versa. By using the dot notation, it kind of naturally groups those things together with that dot at the same spot. Now, one approach we've decided on is we want to make sure we go general to specific. So that helps us give a little bit of an approach to how should things naturally group, because I'm sure everyone's run into a challenge where 3 or 4 different people are developing things, and you get halfway through a project and you realize, okay, one person decided to put account first, another person decided to put year first in all these names. So how do you really negotiate that? It's just a quick conversation at the beginning. So when you get down to the object level, if we're talking about cubes, you'll see stuff like C.revenue, C.rate, C.expense. And similar for dimensions, C.account, C.time.year, C.time.season. And here, time is a more general case of year, and it's a more general case of season. So we do get somewhat of a natural grouping here by including this general to specific approach. Now it still carries further down into subsets. So for subsets, we're going to have S for subset dot account, which is the dimension, dot expense. So if I'm looking at this name, I can see this is going to be a subset of our expense accounts. Similarly, S.time.period.fiscal is going to be a subset of the periods in our fiscal year. Process is just the same, P.main. In this case, if we we use a cube name, revenue, we're going to update this one, or P.revenue.clear. Just clear the cube. Similar for views. And it even goes down to variables. So we're using prefixes for D, V, and P, data variable parameter. For type, numeric or string. So you'll get examples, DS account, DN amount. So this DS account would be the data, it comes from a data source, it's a string, and then it's called account. So any of these are fine to use. It really makes sense. It's whatever makes sense for your organization. These are just some ideas that have helped us across different implementations to be more consistent and also make sure we can reuse things more easily. It's often the time that you're responsible for fixing some code you've never seen before, and the first time you go in there, it can be difficult to really understand, well, all the variables are called I. What does that really mean? So some kind of coding conventions, not necessarily these ones, but just some kind of coding conventions, it makes things more easy on the next person who's going to be in there to maintain that code. So getting back to a little more things that, kind of the demo side of things. Now we've got Architect. Architect also has the advanced rules editor, which I'll show you in case folks aren't familiar with that. Performance modeler, we'll show that. I also want to talk about you can group objects in Performance Modeler, which is quite handy. I'll show you a process template that we use for TIs and talk about some native error handling and IntelliSense. So let's take a look at those now. So if I pop over to Architect, so sorry I can't make this much larger than it is, but if I go into my cubes, I'll say I've got my capital cube here, I've got a rule file for capital. Now if I double click on that, I'll get a little icon that says loading, and then I see this I don't know if we can still call it the new TI edit, the new rules editor, but for folks that have been around for several versions, you may not be familiar with this one. So this is just a rules editor with some nice IntelliSense as well as color formatting. So there's still, by default, the old editor is usually installed. So if you just run a default install on something, you'll not be able to see this editor. And I show this to you in the idea that I do recommend it. I find it's easier to, particularly with the IntelliSense, so if I wanted to do some kind of an item here, if I wanted to pull down a property, ATTRS is a common function. I can get just by typing in ATTRS, it does the formatting on it, it knows it's a function. It also gives me a listing of what parameters it expects. So I don't need to keep going back to the reference material. So I'm kind of getting a little off topic, so let me go back to editing a TI though. So here we are in Architect. Just says here we're editing rules. We can also edit TIs. Now we have one here called New Process. So as you can imagine, this is the Architect editor. I can go down to my Advanced tab, go to Prologue, and this is what the text looks like right now in the regular editor. And this is fine. This has worked really well for a long period of time. And you'll see there's a lot of header information here that we put in. And keep in mind, this is a blank process for us. There's nothing that's really, this doesn't do anything except plugging into our standard error handling and logging features that we have in every TI. But before I go into much detail on this one, I'm going to flip into Performance Modeler. So here we have Performance Modeler. I've got the same TI open. But you'll notice right away we're looking at something that's a little easier to work with. There's color formatting. There's also the IntelliSense. So, and here the IntelliSense is even better. It actually gives you the drop-downs of items you can select flow parameters. So if I wanted to pull down a property from account, I type in ATTRS, open bracket, got my account, I just press enter. Then, I probably just want the item from the account. That's the current one, comma, look at that, I can see the properties that are available right there. So I want the caption base. And then finally, one feature that we've been waiting for a while is you just press enter and it adds a semicolon. You don't need to keep going back and fixing TIs or refer to a semicolon on some random line. We'll just handle that for you. Also in Performance Modeler, so we've got the color formatting and we've got some header information that we use here. And I do recommend some kind of a header. Just think about what makes sense for your team. What kind of information are you looking for? You'll see these are more specific to QDocs. So we put those in there as something that QDocs can pull out for a little bit additional information that's going to be available to end users if they want to look up anything. Also in Performance Modeler is a simple idea of grouping things. So here on the left-hand navigation, we're still in Performance Modeler, and we're just seeing our long list of different objects. And I know an architect, it'll already group them by cubes and by dimensions, and that's fine. You could do that here as well. But sometimes it's better to organize them maybe by the person working on them. So for promotion, if there's a certain set of items that need to be promoted. Maybe organizing them by feature, by application, by web sheet, whatever you want to decide to do. I mean, it's just as easy as right-click on the server name. I'm going to add a new folder. In this case, I'm going to call it Asset. So I've got my new Asset folder, and I see there's a couple of items here that are all related to my Asset application. And just as you imagine, just drag and drop, and they're now in the Asset folder. So I can close that up. I know all my Asset items are in there. Keep in mind, this is a cube and its dimensions. So both the cube and the dimension now live in that one Asset folder. They don't necessarily live in two different folders as they would in Architect. So it's a simple thing, but it can be makes things a little bit easier. Now going back to the TI here, I want to talk a little bit about the native error handling that TM1 has. This is something that I think not a lot of folks really use as well as they could. So this one section we have down here, you'll notice I'm doing a numeric global variable. I'm declaring 4 specific numeric global variables. These are 4 special ones. If you're running a TI and you run into an error and it shows up some kind of an error message saying, oh, error on Prolog, error on metadata, or what have you, a lot of that information is available programmatically. So you can use that to trap errors, log errors. You can do a lot with that. Email out the content. Now what we use that for is we just define those at the top, and then as with any of these errors, the standard process is if an error happens, or if a number of errors happen, it's going to go to the epilogue page, and that's where these will get dealt with. So on the epilogue tab. So on the epilogue tab, we just check those. Because at this point, they're just variables that we can work with. So if there's an error on these things, what should we do? If there's not an error on these things, what should we do? I mean, in our case, we define the difference between a business status and a technical status. There's usually a value in saying, well, what's the business purpose, or what's the business meaning of this thing failing? Maybe data is not available from last night. Maybe our capital information is not up to date. Maybe and then the technical status is going to be something more detailed, saying this particular TI failed. So there's different messages valuable to different people. And just as a general approach, make sure you try and use build for reuse and testing. So put parameters in so that you can call these things. You can debug them. So if you're going to debug one thing, if it calls something else, it passes along some debug information. So you get a debug spit of everything that's available. Now, yeah, I guess that's it for performance. So we talked about architect, we talked about performance model, we talked about this TI. So let's jump back to our notes now. So our advanced rules editor, performance modeler, grouping objects. We walked through the template a bit, talked about our native air handling, showed IntelliSense. So let's keep going. Now we're going to switch gears a little. We're talking about server monitoring. So this is a different application that's available now in TM1 10.2. Operations Management Console is not meant as a development tool. It's meant as a monitoring tool. So it's for someone that maybe is responsible for the SLA agreement. Maybe they're responsible for performance monitoring, that kind of stuff. And it's not meant to be a one-stop shop for everything. It's still to be used in addition to TM1 Top or Resource Monitor, Performance Monitor. But it does give you, it gives you a lot of what's in TM1 Top if you're familiar with that tool, but it's over the web. So I'll talk a little about the configuration, where you log in, what's health status. It's got these ideas of monitors, which is just kind of snapshot into the current state, logging what's happened in the past, and watchdogs really being the alerts. So let's take a look at those now. So something that's new in 10. I think it's in 10.2 is when this came up, is this IBM Cognos Performance Management Hub. And this is a configuration console for a wide variety of variables you can set. In the case of this one, I want to show this because this is something that you will need to configure before Operations Management Console will work for you. So if you've done your install of TM1 or Cognos Express, you'll be able to go to this web page for this piece here. Just put in what your default admin host is. Default group is probably going to be Express administrators or whatever your administrative group would be within TM1. And then also your default server. This is the default TM1 server. And once that's set, then it really knows, okay, when you first go to the page, what should you be looking for? And that's really on this next tab here, the TM1 Operations Console. You'll get a view like this. Get nice drop downs where I can pick, oh, there's my admin host that I configured. Here's the server name that I configured. Here's the group that I configured. And now I'm just going to log in here. And even to point out that you'll need to put in the group name /user to log in. And then once you do that, you're going to be looking at your first operations console. So you use navigation along the left-hand side. There's your admin host. There are some TM1 servers running on that admin host right now. Let's take a look at CXMD. Actually, before we do that, I'll talk about server health. So the server health status is just another way of navigating through these things. You can click on the different servers and it'll jump to monitors for those items. And the monitors tab shows different windows. So you can drag these around your web page and deal with them as you need to. So from here, we're looking at the monitors. We have an advanced view. So let's talk about the different views that are available right now. I'm going to close these up, keep things clear. If I go over to one of these ones, I right-click on it, I get monitor, I get a couple of options. I get the status to be enhanced or basic. Also, for folks that are looking at sandboxing, sandboxing can be something that chews up a lot of memory. So this helps you give a little bit of insight into how much memory is being used by sandboxing on a given server. Also, processes and shores and performance stats that are quite handy. Let's look at the basic one. So it's really going to give you by user what's happening, what are they doing, are there any locks, and if they're so, for how long. So here I can see there's 22 threads, and this is even for a server that's really not doing much right now. It's really just myself doing this demo. There's 22 threads going on. I get into detail on what's happening on those different thread IDs. So it's a quite handy tool to get into detail of what's going on, particularly if you're having a challenge with a slow system or something is hindering performance. But this is all for monitoring current state. The next step is really for logging. Well, you want to make sure you're logging these kind of things to make sure you can look back and run. Maybe you want to run analytics. You might want to try and find a trend if there's a certain time of day where certain things slow down. You can do that here. So you just set a schedule, a new log to be run, a variety of different things you can track here. You can set different limits, starts, ends, frequency of the log writes. It gives you a little bit of more. You can choose what you want to log and then focusing on that rather than just logging everything and kind of hampering the server, reducing performance just for the sake of logging. And then that helps build, the last bit is watchdogs. So let's say we have our smart code company here. See, it's not running right now. I'm just going to verify that I have access to that as an administrator. Okay, yeah, I was able to validate that, so I do have access to that as an administrator, and I have one that's been set up. Here we're saying, I want to know if anyone's using the capital module and there's more than 10 threads open. So if that happens, log that. So I'm, just for the sake of argument, if I know that the capital module is maybe rule intensive, or there's a lot of, it may be a very large model that's quite slow to recalculate. If I see there's 10 people working on that at the same time, I kind of want to know when's that busy period. That may help me understand if I get 10 emails, if I get a whole bunch of emails saying the system's really slow, when was it slow? Why was it slow? Which object was slow? And that helps give it a little bit more actionable information that it's not just a random email saying, hey, this thing is not working as I expect, it's too slow, you need to buy a bigger box. You can be more surgical, more accurate in what you want to do for that. So that's what I wanted to show you for Operations Management Console. So just as one last time, the PM Hub is where you'll configure it for the first time. Once you configure it, you can log in and you can look at your different TM1 servers on your admin host and both the monitoring, logging, and watchdog features of that. So next is CubeDocs. So CubeDocs is a fantastic tool that everyone seems to be very, very happy with. Now, documentation by itself is usually not a very glamorous topic, but everyone hates doing it, and we all understand that it needs to be done because it's valuable stuff. So you end up with this challenge where, okay, it's something that we all know we need to do, but none of us want to do it. And then it ends up being, it's old documentation, so you're not really sure if it's accurate, people don't trust it, and it's a tough situation. It's a hard thing to resolve. CubeDocs is a really good fit for this kind of thing because it does documentation of the application, the rules and feeders, the TI processes. It has really nice diagrams, and it has custom text. So if there's certain things you want to add in there to make sure that folks are aware of special cases, boundary conditions, design decisions that may have been made. You can put that into the custom tags, and those are salient points that are shown up for the user to make sure they know what's going on. Now the new part, I'll show you the documentation part, but really what's brand new, and this is just in the last month, is the change management portion. So if you ever wonder, well, how do I know what to promote? What's changed between two environments? How do I validate the two environments are in sync after a promotion? The change management part will help a lot with that. So let's take a look at that part now. So here's the documentation of one of the models that we have. This is a standard. This is the general view that you would see CubeDocs documentation in. It's all web-based. And you can play with the formatting a bit, but I like the navigation. It's fairly intuitive. On the left-hand navigation, you'll see, well, what are my different applications that I have here? You'll see the kind of natural grouping. So here we've got financial planning. That's what we have open right now. You can also go into particular models broken out by cubes or dimensions or processes. And you can even add other documentation if you want into here as well, and maybe supplementary. There's also search functionality that's in here as well, which can be very handy. If someone says, the depreciation calculation is wrong. So let's say I come in here, or pardon, purchase cost. If I come in here and say purchase cost, I do a search for that. Oh, I see my monthly expense There's monthly expense, and it uses purchase cost. So just like that, it searched through all of the rules across the entire solution and gave me instances where I can see that just that word. That's something you can't do in your solution right now. If someone says there's something wrong with purchase cost, right now you'll have to go through different cubes that may or may not have purchase cost, may or may not have feeders, and it's a laborious process to just get that simple insight into, well, where is this thing being used? Sorry, I digress for a bit. Let's go back to the contents. So let's say we're looking at our applications and maybe we're learning about a new application, this financial planning piece. So we click on financial planning. Now what I quite like is it does delineate between, it gives you the idea of owners and users. So there's additional information you can put into Cube Docs to make this more full featured. So I can say that the financial planning application does what it does. Who owns it? This could be very handy for change control. Who has the rights to make change, who approve changes to this thing? And what probably jumps out is this diagram. So there's nothing I had to do. There's no extra keywords or anything you need to put in here to generate these diagrams. You could point Cube Docs at a model you have right now, generate it, and you get these diagrams to show you what are the different pieces, or the different cubes connecting this financial application. And at an application level, what are these different things here? Well, there's a part of it's a TM1 application web. There's some Excel files here that are related to our planning templates. There's some dashboards. I have to kind of go through this more quickly for time purposes, but hopefully you get the idea that there's a lot of information available here. And this is all HTML. You don't need to worry about anyone changing the rule file accidentally because they're walking through some code. This is all disconnected, very, very safe. So you see our list of dimensions. And what I quite like is the cubes by dimension matrix. So here we can see of all the cubes that we're using, what are the dimensions? What are the intersections? Does this make sense? Maybe if I look at the capital cube and I see that it's using capital and capital list, I look at depreciation. Well, why isn't depreciation using capital list if our capital cube is using it? So just this simple matrix here can give you a little bit of insight into, is there a disconnect across some of your cubes where there may or may be something missing? Version. Everything has a version dimension except for our GL transactions. Maybe that's okay, maybe that's not. But in this viewpoint, that kind of jumps out at you, whereas navigating through a whole set, you will not be able to see that. So just at a high level, Cube Docs does a great job of documentation. But the next part, let's look at what Cube Docs looks like from the front end. It's fairly straightforward tool. This is the UI for it. So all you need to do is select your connection. You can put in your different configuration folder or database folder, test your credentials if you need to, and then once you set that up, it's available in a drop-down, and you can just generate that out. Due to time, I won't do that right now, but that's all you really need to do. What I do want to show you before we go is the compare versions. Each time you generate something, it actually saves all the versions saves a version of the documentation. And now it gives you the ability to make comparisons here. So let's say I want to compare version 1 to version 2. So I've only done 2 clicks. I picked my baseline, I picked my revised, and I can generate that. And all that's going to do is it's going to say, well, what happened between those two? Let's just take a look at what that looks like. So if we look at the output of the comparison, you'll see it's a similar structure here, navigation along the left. Now the list is a lot less. So I can see if I go down to capital, it looks like something's changed in capital. There's a rule timestamp, so it looks like the rule file changed at a certain time, so that's just an indicator something's going on. And then, hey, those Cube Docs notices change. So this is obviously just for demo purposes, but the idea being here that someone else on the team makes a change to something, you're trying to promote stuff, you just want to do a quick validation of what, validation everything's in sync, and you can pick up on stuff like this. Oh, hey, there's a change in the capital cube. Is it supposed to be there? Is it not supposed to be there? At the end of it, maybe you run this comparison. Does prod match dev? Okay, aside from the timestamps, it does. That's great. That gives you that peace of mind that you didn't forget anything. You didn't forget a property. You didn't forget a cube or a rule or a different dimension. And even when it comes to dimensions, there's a little insight into modifications. So here I can see that there's been changes to the chores and the cubes and the dimensions system objects. So not only at the object level, but also at the data level, you can see there's been adjustments here, which is very, very handy. So I think that's about it. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. We talked about server monitoring. We talked about cube docs. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that, yes, it does documentation. It does a great job of that. But what's brand new and a really fantastic feature is that you can do this change management piece, which I think is really cool. So I think, Ian, I'll turn it back to you. And if you want to do the wrap, then I think we're in good shape. And thanks everyone for your time.
All right, Bob, thank you very much for that. I'll just put myself back to the presenter, show my screen here. There we are. Okay, Bob, well, thank you very much for that. That was excellent. Great overview on all those tips and tricks, and then your final overview on cube docs. And then just for everybody online as well, you may be new to cube docs. It's a solution in which Clear Insight, we are the key suppliers of cube docs to North America. And so if that has excited your interest, and you can see how that could be a great way to drive efficiency in your models, understand changes, understand your decision flows. Many need it for proper documentation, for legal purposes as well. It could be a great tool for you. If you're at all interested in seeing more about that, just let us know. Reach out to myself or reach out to us at our contact we'll show you at the end. And we're happy to take you through cube docs in a deeper level and talk to you about what might be involved in testing it in your environment and what the related costs are. So our time is quickly coming to a close here. We'll just turn over to Q&A for a moment, and I'll just ask Susan if there's any questions that have come in that we have time to answer.
No, Ian, I'm afraid there are no questions at this time.
No questions. All right. Very good. Well, we will, well, actually we had one little poll that I want to ask for everybody who's still online here. And, you know, a lot of you answered other. So, Susan, if you could open up this poll, what were some of the other things that you would like to see? Bob gave us some great overviews on a number of different areas in TM1. And we'll open up this poll, and if you folks could just answer in on what would you like to see on the next webinar. You know, clearly there's some tremendous insight that the team here could offer you, and so what areas are you looking for more help on, and we can address that in the next webinar. All right, we'll just give you another couple more seconds there to make your choices. Again, all that apply for you. All right, Susan, you could close that up for us now. And boy, equal need for help on all of these areas. And so we will seek to address those in the next webinar where we can. And certainly, as we bring our webinar to a close, we would be more than happy to help address some of your issues directly. Don't hesitate to reach out to myself or some of the others on the team here at Clear Insight. You can reach us at info@clearinsight.ca. There's our phone number. And by all means, follow us on the various social media things. We have a YouTube channel as well, in which a number of these tips and tricks are posted onto our YouTube channel. So look forward to connecting with many of you down the road, and we thank you very much for joining our webinar today and hope it was of tremendous value to you. Thank you very much, and we will close our webinar for now.